All right. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dan Garfield, and today we're going to talk about a lot of the new features in Codefresh that have been worked on, single sign-on, custom triggers, cron jobs, a lot of really exciting stuff that's been going on in Codefresh that we haven't had a chance to even talk about yet. There's so many things going on. And to introduce this, just sort of by way of introducing the agenda, we'll talk about some build optimization that's gone into Codefresh, which is very significant. We'll talk about new triggers, multi-stage build. A number of changes have been made to the way that we handle Codefresh plugins. So there are a lot of exciting possibilities there. And then we'll talk about single sign-on. And to introduce all this, we've invited our CTO and co-founder, Oleg, to join us. And he is a powerhouse, super user, got on the containerization train, I think, earlier than just about anybody. And I'm also convinced that he doesn't ever sleep. I always get messages from him when it's very late in the night and he's giving me feedback on blog posts or on presentations I did or things. And he's got an eye for detail, even when he should be asleep. So I think he sleep edits is what happens maybe. So with that, Oleg, do you want to say a few words about yourself? And let me unmute you because you're still muted. Sorry.
Everybody, thank you very much for introduction, Dan. So basically, I'm very passionate about containers technology and about the methodology of how to adopt and facilitate containers to build the great CI/CD for microservices and really make this technology a huge accelerator for development. Most of my time I spent with customers and assist them to migrate to containers, and it drives us to add more and more features to Codefresh so they can maximize and enjoy the product.
Great. And if you want to take over the screen share, here, let me stop the share so you can do it from your screen. There we go. And then we'd be thrilled to have you take us through some of the new features and show us what's going on.
Okay, so let's very briefly see the agenda, and then I will try to describe every feature and make the real demo so you can see how it works in reality.
Oh, and we actually went through the agenda, so you can jump straight to slide 5 if you want.
Okay. Okay. So the one of main assets of Codefresh as container CI/CD platform is, of course, the pipeline. Our pipeline is very unique and provides a really easy and scalable way to build and deploy containers. So, but one of very important optimizations that we recently added is ability to cache the images as part of our pipeline. So it's not only adds, it's amazing accelerator for pipeline. It makes everything much more like local machine. So basically, when you build images in Codefresh pipeline, you're getting the experience of really local Docker. So, but before I will drill down into the details, I just want to briefly make an overview about Codefresh pipeline, how it's really built, and what is unique about it. So, first of all, every step in our pipeline, whether you build your code, build Docker image, run tests, deploy, or run integration tests, everything run inside containers. So you get a huge flexibility to decide what will be the best runtime to execute your code. In addition, For every pipeline, we attach a Docker daemon so you can build very easily your images and do it in huge scale. So two important attributes of Codefresh pipeline. It runs inside containers, so you can build almost every useful container-based pipeline. Second, it's you have Docker daemon assigned to attached to pipeline, so it's highly scalable. You don't need to maintain infrastructure. We are doing it for you. It's scalable, secure, isolated, and we invest many big effort to make it highly scalable. We are running thousands of pipelines in our platform.
And Oleg, I would add, I think most people know this by now because we talk about it a lot, but all of this is actually running on top of Kubernetes. Codefresh is all built directly on top of Kubernetes, and it's one of the reasons that we can scale in this way.
Exactly, good point. The pipeline, after all, is translated or converted to Kubernetes assets. So basically, we are scalable as Kubernetes is. Thank you. In addition, for every pipeline, we add virtual file system. Okay, it's not it's file systems that are not located on the host, and it provides from one side to share the information both between steps and even keep assets between pipelines execution. And once again, nothing hosted on top of virtual machines. So it's very, the pipeline itself is very mobile. You can run it almost on every host. You can scale it as much as you need. However, one thing was missing in our implementation. We couldn't easily provide facilitation of Docker cache based on the images that already have been built in previous executions. Okay, like you have the experience you have on your local machine. For example, you run several Docker builds, and the Docker, by definition, using your local cache. And now we we created such mechanism. So basically, when you will run build Docker build steps in Codefresh pipeline, you will be immediately got an advantage on top of local cache, and we are managing all this. And once again, it's very important to emphasize that nothing located in the host, everything is isolated, highly scalable, so you still see our pipeline as fully containerized asset, but from the other side, you got the great experience of building the image.
Yeah, and I mean, previous to this release, we had a number of different optimizations built in to speed up how quickly we could build Docker images. But I noticed that since this volume has been added, there's been a marked improvement in just how fast it is, especially as I've I've been doing a lot of matrix pipelines and those kinds of things. And I ran a test this morning looking at if we disabled the caching mechanisms, the optimization mechanisms, and then we turned it back on, how fast it would be. And I found that it was about 78% faster. So I went from a 2.5-minute build to about a 35-second build. So of course your mileage may vary for depending on what your situation is, but it's pretty safe to say, well, what we're seeing is a market improvement, and I've definitely noticed it in my day-to-day use.
Yeah, the results are indeed dramatic. Just take a look on the build that I can easily run in my repository, just examples that I will use for every demo during this webinar. And you can see, for example, that once pipeline is running, we will assign immediately Docker daemon dynamically for this pipeline, as I mentioned. But then you can see how fast the images are executed. And every step, pay attention, every step runs inside the image. And those images are cached for this specific pipeline. So 17 seconds, you execute the full pipeline of build, test, and deploy. Okay, any questions, Dan, related to this topic?
No, I think we're good. Let's move on to triggers. And if anybody in the audience, if you have questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A section, and we'll address them near the end.
Okay. So a little bit about the triggers. So Codefresh is a CI/CD platform for Kubernetes. So it's nature that we are running pipeline as a result of different Git events, commit, push, pull request, and any other standard events. So it was already supported and very successfully adopted by our customers. However, as evolving of the system, and we see that more and more customers using Codefresh for deployment and for complex container delivery workflows, there is a need for additional triggers. And recently we introduced the framework that provide the ability to add new triggers. And on top of this framework, we implemented two triggers. One, triggers that can run pipeline as part of event that coming from Docker Hub. So basically you push your image to Docker Hub from any place, from Codefresh, from other tools, container builders, or even manually, and I will show this use case as well. And this will automatically trigger pipeline in Codefresh. In addition, we introduced Cron Jobs that provide you ability to execute a specific pipeline in chosen interval of time. It very useful in many use cases. The most common is, for example, you want to deploy your code to staging or to other environment every night, every period. You want to constantly, for example, test running environment to measure or to validate that it's okay, etc. So this capability is supported as well, and I will show it immediately. And we are going to support more and more custom interesting triggers. Most of them will come from community. Some of them will come from us.
Yeah, and I would just add on that cron jobs thing. I know that I know a lot of organizations who like to deploy to a sort of canary set of servers automatically or on a very close interval, and then they'll do the deploy to production sort of once a day. So they have just a little more control. And then another thing I really like about cron jobs is you can do things like checking automatically to see if underlying image dependencies have changed. Maybe you're building off of a base image. So that's another really great use case for those cron jobs.
Yeah. Okay, so a really short diagram that just emphasize or visualize the flow and the use cases. So every time after you will define the trigger of Docker Hub in Codefresh, inside Codefresh, you will push to Docker Hub through CLI, different CI tools, including Codefresh, API, and Docker Hub will generate the webhook, and this will immediately run pipeline. One of demos that I will show right now is how we are going to deploy to run in Kubernetes environment once the image was changed. Okay, so let's do fast demo, and for this, again, I will use the repositories that by the public one and will be shared, and it includes a few pipelines build, but basically build multi-stage Docker build and push it to registry. So let's see how it looks like. Okay, this is my repository. Okay, this is just an Express Node.js application with a multi-stage Docker file. So let's change something in this repository and make the commit. Very straightforward. We can. I don't want to show the full Git flow, so basically I would create the branch and then merge it to master. Currently, just for demonstration, I will just change something. Filling out new features. And I will push it. Okay. So let's go back to Codefresh. So immediately you can see that started a full pipeline of this repository. So basically, we clone the code, okay? We execute multi-stage build that includes cache phase. Cache phase basically just store the dependencies, Node.js, node modules, dependencies, etc. Right after it's running the test phase that basically build phase that basically testing this code. Okay, you can see immediately that it's running some gulp test, and after that it's building the final deploy image that will be pushed to an internal Codefresh registry and Docker Hub. Okay. So this is Docker Hub step. Let's just wait as if it will be pushed. Okay. Okay, good. So we are good. The image was built. Okay, but pay attention. Immediately right after this, started additional pipeline called deploy. Okay, how it looks like. Okay. Basically, currently this pipeline only was triggered by change of the image. And here I'm just printing the payload, the information that comes from the Docker Hub. Okay, so you see the image name, you see the whole information, and I can use this pipeline to validate that this image is, for example, secure, if this image is ready for deploy, and finally to deploy. So let's show how I'm going to deploy it. So I have here this step of deploy. I will just uncomment it. I'm using Helm to deploy to Kubernetes. I will not spend the time of showing the all our Kubernetes stuff that we have super cool features about integration of Kubernetes and facilitation the whole CD for Kubernetes. But basically just will deploy to some staging environment. And for example, currently, if what I will do is just manually will push this image to Docker Hub, we will see the same effect. And now after I will enable the deployment, we will see it actually deployed. So let's say I'm again changing the something here, okay? But this time, I'm not going even to push it to Git. It's kind of, imagine it's kind of hotfix. I'm just building the image, okay? I will put hotfix tag, okay? And right after this, I will push it to registry. This will actually, I prefer to put right now the master tag. I'll explain immediately why. Okay.
Now, while this is pushing, I would just mention to our viewers, obviously we don't want you to, don't go and build images locally and then push them to get deployed. In general, that's not the best pattern, but the point here is to demonstrate that there is this capability. And in fact, most organizations of any reasonable size will have sort of a split organization of trust where the people who are capable of deploying and the people who are capable of making changes are essentially different. And so this lets you set up that sort of two-stage pipeline where somebody can create and execute, and then when the images are ready, they can push them up, and then those can be taken and handled essentially by a different level of security or a different team. And you have a lot more granularity and control over kind of how you box those permissions out.
Yes, definitely. Of course, as you mentioned, the point is to separate between a Docker push phase and actual post-push logic and execution. And Codefresh facilitated it's now very, very easy. It will increase the ability to control the quality and different aspects of a Docker image. For example, before the push, you can check the security, you can check additional items because it's totally separated. And currently, you keep the build image pipeline very short and from one side, but from the other side, when you take the Docker Hub event and actually doing something with this image, you can, in parallel, do more complex stuff. So here, currently, I deployed this to Kubernetes. You can see that I have webinar release, okay, and here I have the webinar demo endpoint, and this deployed to production.
Now, just a question. If you would show the UI for the triggers again, this is something that's very new inside of Codefresh because typically the triggers were all built off of essentially either running the custom webhook or just being linked to Git. Now this trigger UI isn't available today. Is that correct?
So currently we finished, first of all, thank you for asking, Dan. Currently it's available for, we finished successfully private beta, and on Monday next week, it will be publicly available. Currently it's was run on our partners, and from the Monday it will be ready for everybody. Basically, and I really encourage to use it because basically now you can use Codefresh even in post Docker image phase. However, again, our ability to build images is amazingly fast. But if you want to run our pipeline on post Docker push phase, currently it's very easy. So let's very short see how you can define the trigger. Okay, so I will delete the triggers that I added. So it's very, very simple. You can choose the registry or cron option, and as I said, many is about to come. You will put your namespace basically your user how Docker Hub basically which terminology Docker Hub is using for a user. This is basically this part. Okay, then you will put the email repository name. Okay, and currently the supported action is push, and a regular expression for filtering the text. For example, you want to run this pipeline only when a tag is production or ready for QA or any other pattern, versions and web version pattern, etc. Okay, so let's say I will say production.
Yeah, and I'd add here that this push image action, this tagging action, the way that a new tag is added to an image is essentially through a push. So it will, even if you just added a new tag to an existing image, it would fire off of this trigger.
Exactly, a tag, label, everything that actually changed the image. Add additional layer or change the tag will be pushed. Okay, so we have the endpoint, and now we added the successfully added the trigger. Now, if I will go from our UI to and follow the URL that exists here, I will come to webhook Docker Hub webhook page, and I can say and from this point I created the reference for between pipeline and this event.
And just a question on that, we've been focusing on Docker Hub, but is there any reason that this wouldn't work with other registries that I have connected to my Codefresh account?
So we are going to add, currently it's specifically work with Docker Hub, but we are going to support every existing registry. Of course, those that support hooks. Hooks in general is not kind of standard. Okay, it's not like every registry must, as part of spec specification, to support it. So we need to implement it to every registry. But the great thing that is very easy to do with our framework, and we even if a registry do not explicitly expose webhook, we can, in very smart way, to identify the changes and trigger this event.
Yeah. Great.
Okay.
So in the interest of time, I think we probably better move on to another feature unless you had any last words on this.
Yeah, only to show the UI of Cron. Very easy. You can add the interval. Okay, so for example, say I want to run it every minute. Here I can put some message, the currently attribute of this job. It's really works after a minute. Okay, so okay, and if
you're going to run out of builds really quick here doing it this way.
So meanwhile, I will move to something else, but you will see that after 1 minute it will be executed. Okay. Cool. So any question about this?
No, this makes a lot of sense, and it's been a highly anticipated feature from a lot of our users, and I even see it in the webinar chat people saying this is really cool.
Somebody asked about the additional registries, and as you already articulate, and yes, we are going to add tens of useful triggers based on our framework, and all of them will be available, where most of them will be public. Okay, so let's so as I promised, the cron job was executed, okay, and here as part of event metadata, it's you see that the information of came, okay. So every minute it will be executed till I will cancel this. Okay, so let's move on to a multi-stage build with a target parameter. So basically, it's not a big deal. However, I do want to make kind of clarification what we've done and what we support in terms of multi-stage build. So actually, multi-stage build is one of the additional ways to define your container CI process, means build, test, compile, build, test in one Docker file where it's separated, and you can very easily to kind of reuse it. So the same capability you can do with Codefresh YAML. However, if you choose using the multi-stage build, for example, in this case, I'm using the cache phase, then I'm using the test phase, and finally I'm building the image. Codefresh can, in one step, will execute this build as part of a Codefresh YAML file, so you can just put build step with the link to multi-stage build, and it will execute the all multi-stage logic, so you can follow this pattern very easily. And recently we added the target parameter. It's a supported flag in Docker. So currently you can choose what will be the final stage inside the I mean, as part of multi-stage, in case you want to skip the building last image from whatever case, and currently it's supported, so you can continue facilitating it. I again want to mention that Codefresh provide the very close logic from Codefresh YAML. So if you want to use the step that, for example, should be executed in specific image, you just can use our freestyle step, and this will work. So this is about this capability. I already showed, I will not show it again, but in the previous example, this is what this is the Docker file I used previously when I showed the build. Okay.
Now, I'll just add that at the end of this, there is a link to this repository for anybody who'd like to see it. All these examples are in there.
Okay. Okay. Codefresh plugin. So if you will look again in Codefresh YAML file, you will see that one of very popular steps called freestyle steps, that basically you just put the image, image name, and execute your logic, where the virtual file system is automatically attached to this container by Codefresh. Okay, so you can facilitate. It's very so basically you can take every image in Docker Hub and use it as part of your CI/CD logic. That imagine that you can have unlimited steps that can facilitate your logic. You can take a Slack image and use it in Codefresh pipeline. You can take tons of useful stuff and use it here. So this is already supported and widely used by customers. However, what we added recently is two things. One, we support natively entry point of the image that you put in freestyle step. So till this feature, if your image has entry point defined in your in its Docker file, so we override it to support our logic with our entry point. However, now we added additional parameter called args. Okay, and if I will go and see it here, you can see that if, for example, specific image has his entry point, and basically all parameters that you will put will just be added to this entry point, and you don't need to put any scripting. You just need to mention the parameters. It will be already supported in Codefresh. So we will see more and more pipelines that will look without scripting. We will see that people just will put the parameters. For example, my first parameter, etc. So this and you don't need to make any scripting, and every and logic is encapsulated inside the inside this step. So this is related to entry point. In addition, we did we extended the Git clone, out of the box Git clone step that was used in Codefresh. So if you will create Codefresh YAML with some workflow, with some steps, we behind the scene we add so-called main clone steps that basically will create automatically clone of your repository. The disadvantage of this is when you need to customize your main clone step. Okay, for example, you want to bring, use Git modules, or you want to bring only, you don't want to bring history with your Git clone to improve the capabilities. And now we just provide the ability to override this step. Okay, you can put any image with Git, and you can put any logic that will be any logic that's supported by Git. Okay, and the result will be saved on shared file system, and you can use it later. But first,
so do I have to set some sort of target to make it so that what I clone goes into the shared volume? Or another way of saying that maybe is, how does it know to clone it into the shared volume?
Yeah, it's good point. So for when you customize, yeah, it's correct. By default, the current dir for every step is a shared volume. Okay, so you don't need to worry about it. You just need to be aware what the name of the folder you create. Okay, so for example, if you are going to GitHub and take this repository, okay, on shared volume, that is current folder, will be created the webinar folder, and then if you want to use it, you need to make explicit reference or use the working directory attribute. Okay. So currently you can customize your Git clone. This is an important one. And the second one, you can just skip it. So before, because we started from kind of CI perspective and gradually expanded to CD, we understood that there are many pipelines in Codefresh that just don't need to make Git clone, because every asset's already stored in registry and Artifactory, in Helm registry, etc. So you don't need to make the Git clone of source code. And we added additional flag, currently called skip main clone, that if it's true, it will skip at all the any cloning of Git. Okay.
There's a question here from Michal that I don't fully understand. So Michal, if you'd like at the end, maybe I can promote you into the room during the Q&A and you can ask your question. But we can go ahead and move forward.
Okay. So we're waiting?
No. Go ahead, move forward.
Okay. Okay. So customization of Git clone step, skipping the Git clone at all, and native support of entry point in freestyle step that again makes the pipeline short, easy, where all the logic encapsulated inside the image, so you can take advantage over thousands of useful images in internet, or use your internal images if you want to keep some kind of standard. Okay. Let's move to additional important feature that we added as part of Codefresh Enterprise plan. So we have many enterprise customers that have very clear regulation about how tools are installed or interact in their organization. So, and we are adding more and more enterprise readiness features like RBAC, etc. And now we added the SSO. So SSO basically enables you to take any vendor that used in your organization for authentication and authorization, and basically connect it to be the authorization, the only authorization gateway for Codefresh. So, for example, if I will go to login page, okay, and let's say I want to, I purchased enterprise plan, and I want that everybody will log into Codefresh only with their corporate credentials. I will be redirected to the page with specific vendor. In this case, we choose the Google. It's our internal SSO, I mean Codefresh SSO. And I'm completing the full two-factor authentication, and I'm inside the Codefresh. Okay, so and this is the only way I can log into Codefresh. Of course, you can continue using the companies that want to use GitHub or other or Bitbucket or other vendors to log in. They can use this one if they don't need to SSO. But this is important feature as part of our enterprise readiness, and I'm happy to see more and more companies using it. To enable it, it's very easy. It's part of fun. Once again, once you will purchase the enterprise plan, you can immediately enable it. Any questions?
No, I think that's really cool, and this has been a highly requested feature from a number of enterprise customers. And as long as the provider also has two-factor authentication, that means that you also have two-factor authentication on Codefresh. So great security improvement, and also highly convenient for organizations who are taking advantage of these, which is really, I mean, any company of any decent size really is using this. So that's great news, and we're excited to share that with everyone.
Okay, and the last one, the feature that we actually released today, it's a so-called social onboarding widget. After all, we are working. We have tens of thousands of users on. From open source, from the community, or small, medium businesses, and we wanted to provide them very fast onboarding experience, help them to establish Kubernetes CI/CD very fast with no need of scripting or making complex stuff. So we added so-called the onboarding widgets that helps you to define different paths from different phases that will help you to meet the final or see the value of Codefresh and be able to deploy with instruction. And it's part of our kind of gamification theme, where we will add more and more points, and will encourage people to become the super fresh and gain more and more points. And we, of course, will help to practically, it will guide the people, the users, to get the very concrete, useful pipeline that in many cases can bring you from commit to production.
This is great. This is great, and great way to help people get a tour going. And I know that one of the ways that people use Codefresh is really to introduce their teams to Kubernetes and to containers. And this actually gives them sort of a checklist of like, hey, here's how you get up and running. Here's where you need to be. So should help teams migrate a lot faster and have a much better experience. And so that's really wonderful. So unless we have any more comments on this, I think we can move on to questions. We do have a number of questions. Oleg, did you have any final thoughts here?
Excuse me?
Did you have any final thoughts on the social onboarding widget?
No. I just encourage you to to try and share with team and with people that you think that are going to migrate to container or Kubernetes, and then it will dramatically shorten their onboarding time.
Great. So I want to ask you maybe just one more question on that. That's is that coming out on Monday? Is that the plan?
No. This is already.
It's currently available, so anybody who signs up new will see this. If I invite a team member and they sign in, they'll get this view. Is that right?
Correct.
Great. Wonderful. So with that, I'm going to take back the screen share, if you don't mind, and we'll move on to the questions. Well, actually, I'll leave the screen share with you because you may want to reference it. So thank you, Oleg, for walking us through that and showing us all the new stuff that's being worked on. I see a lot of excitement from people both asking questions, messaging me personally, and then just talking in the inside of the chat. Couple of questions that we wanted to have answered. One was, will there be more trigger actions? If so, what are some examples? So did you have any other plans for trigger actions that you wanted to add into Codefresh?
Yeah, first of all, the engineers that lead all this agenda is Alexei from our team. He has many very useful public repository, and you can reach him and discuss it. I will say that first of all, we will cover all other registries, and we will add more useful triggers that related to production, means facilitate different events of Kubernetes, because we understand that the deployment process, it's no more the transaction. I mean, it's not like you deploy something and it's finished. And you need more and more automatic response workflow on top of different events of Kubernetes. So will come more and more sophisticated triggers related to Kubernetes.
Interesting. Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what we come up with. But of course, we do invite any of our users, send feedback, hit us up on Twitter. If you're in a Slack channel, send us a message. Feel free to reach out to or contact us and tell us if there are things that you're looking for from the trigger perspective, especially that you'd like to see added in there. And I think now we kind of have this framework where it's going to be easier to add new triggers onto. One of the questions kind of about the plugins. So if you have an image that can basically execute just when you, I believe you can have a step where you specify an image and you pass in environmental variables, and that image will basically automatically run what it needs to do. You don't have to pass anything extra to it. Is that right? Do I need to use the CMD sort of empty to trigger the entry point, or how does that work?
So once again, if you will go to take some image that already has the entry point, so there's no the CMD, there's the entry point, basically define the execution part of inside the container. So every additional parameter will be added to the entry point. You don't need to add any commands. You just take the logic and add only the arguments. Okay. The good examples that we are going to release, for example, Slack notification plugin. So basically, how it will work? It will just get the parameters of your channel, the message that you need to send, etc., and it will execute. You don't need to execute any command line of Slack. You don't need to use some CLIs, etc. So,
gotcha. And one other question on that: if I pass in that CMD parameter, can I also do a commands parameter? Yes. Can they coexist?
Yes. I think I need to recheck it, but I'm almost sure that when you will put the commands, okay, I mean when you will start scripting, this will kind of override. We will override the entry point, so you just can you basically can override the entry point. Okay, so it's the commands part is stronger. Okay.
Yeah.
And by the way, I just remind for our audience that Codefresh has a concept of contexts where you can define different set of parameters, information, secrets that will be automatically injected in pipeline. For example, when you will add some Kubernetes cluster or registry, it will be automatically injected into your container so you can use it as well. So for example, if you want to deploy to Kubernetes and you use a Helm plugin, you do not need to specify anything related to Kubernetes once you edit it in our integration page. So the approach of less scripting is more, we see that it's more and more popular, and we see it in many of pipelines. Once again, because basically every useful image can be seen as a step or plugin in Codefresh.
Gotcha. Well, thank you very much. So with that, I believe we are done, and we're out of time. So I just want to thank everybody that joined us. And we're going to take this video, we'll split it up into sections, we'll post a playlist on YouTube so you can quickly reference the different sections that you like, as well as the slides, and then all of this will be posted on the GitHub repository with this stuff, and we'll have a follow-up blog post and some other things. So it shouldn't be hard to find any of this information afterwards. Oleg, any final thoughts before we jump off?
No, just want to encourage you to use Codefresh. The team, the whole team, all our teams, that basically all of us developers, and we are adding more and more great capabilities to Codefresh. So we'll be happy to get your feedback and your thoughts, and see you in KubeCon. Yep,
we'll see you in KubeCon, and Oleg, go get some sleep. I believe it's midnight where you are, and if I know your schedule, you only have 4 or 5 hours of work left, so we'll let you get to it. Have a good night. We'll see you.
Bye-bye.